Hello, welcome to my channel. And on this on this first conversation, I'd just like us to reflect on a few key concepts. And the first one is there's often a mixture of interpretation as to who is a migrant, who is an immigrant, who is a refugee, who is an IDP, is an IDP a refugee at home, who are climate refugees, for instance. That's a term that I've had used quite often, who are returnees, and also who the diaspora is. And looking forward to engaging on this session that I will call definition of key concepts. So let's start with a migrant generally, and I'm going to explain these in very lay terms. Often when I've spoken to people who are not engaged every day in the migration space, I start with the question of who, especially if they're in a foreign country, I ask who of us is a migrant. Often I am a migrant in that country over a short time, and many of them have traveled from their home countries to attend a conference, for instance. And because I would say of the negative connotation that now is subscribed to migration, many people are afraid to actually say they are migrants. And so I often surprise them after defining who a migrant is, for them to realize that up to 80% of us in that room are a migrant. And so basically, a migrant is someone who has moved from their home country, changed their habitual residential point. It could be a student who's gone abroad to study. Tourists are migrants, although we don't speak of them as such, but they're temporal migrants in the duration that they are in another country. And under migrants, people are either migrants voluntarily, although there is such a blurring of what is voluntary migration and what is not, and we'll take a deep dive further when we much later on this channel. And we also have forced migration, someone who's just been forced out of home. The next key concept is a refugee, and this is very categorical. We have the 1951 convention, UN convention, that clearly defines who a refugee is, and this is someone who's left home, who's been forced to flee. Forced to flee is really integral to underline, and they cannot avail themselves of the protection of their country, so they will cross an international border and go seek what we call asylum in a different country. Now, there is often a term that is being used as climate refugees, and this is related to people that are forced to flee home, to leave home as a result of factors that would be considered climatic in nature. That term is not agreed on, and there is no international definition that speaks to it, but it's a term that people usually use for engagement purpose. The Nansen initiative, now called the Platform for Disaster Displacement, constantly talks about people displaced by conflicts or by disasters. So that's very much close to so-called climate refugees. And then we have IDPs, the internally displaced persons, and this is a phenomenon that's quite common in Africa, in Asia as well. And these are essentially citizens of a country that have been displaced from their homes by could be a couple of reasons. It could be political reasons, conflict, but it could also be they're displaced by disasters, loss of livelihoods, maybe because of drought, famine, etc. Recently, in 2011, in the Horn of Africa, there was a huge drought that displaced people both at home, within the borders, and outside. Very important to remember is that IDPs have not crossed any border. They've been dislocated from their homes and sought protection, sought safety in another region within their country. The returnees, and very closely related to that, returnees are often, we speak about returnees and reintegration. When people leave home and come back, so those are the returnees. They could be returning migrants, but also increasingly we are having refugees return home when conditions of safety are restored. And so these are people that we call returnees. We could also have diasporas returning home. So who are the diaspora? The diaspora are essentially migrant people who have left home, settled in a second country, and very important, still keep ties with their home countries. What kind of ties are these? These could be economic ties. These could be maybe they're still investing at home. This could also be talked about economic ties, but these could also be social ties. They have families, and at times some of them even have political ties at home, and some of them continue to also influence events at home. Sorry. Closely linked to that is the whole aspect of remittances, and remittances in regards to migration are the resources that people living abroad, diasporas, send back to their countries. They could be supporting their families, but they could also just be investing for themselves. So those are terms that we are going to use a lot in this channel. The black and white definition really doesn't really hold so much. We're going to talk about issues like root causes of migration, and these are the views on these are really diverse. There is really the term economic migrants, but this is more economy as a driver of migration. As we continue to have this conversation, you're going to notice that, making a really clear-cut separation of what could be economic drivers or disasters, for instance, in a country that is at war. It's not very clear to define that. But that's why we have this channel. That's why I want us to engage. And I would like to urge you to subscribe.